Hey, everybody. Welcome to Kevin Live with Kevin for the very first time doing our podcast live. Now, this podcast won't come out on the podcast stream until July, but today it's live. And today it's a momentous occasion for two reasons. That's one. The other reason is I have with me Jacob Morgan, and he is the first person who I don't write a paycheck to who has been my guest on this show more than once. So, Jacob, welcome.
Thank you. I'm very thrilled you agreed to have me back.
And so I'm going to introduce you to Jacob, tell you a little bit about him, and then we'll dive in. Okay. Jacob is a trained futurist and one of the world's leading authorities on leadership, employee experience, which we talked about when he was here before, and the future of work. He speaks in front of tens of thousands of people each year, and his content is seen over 1 million times a year. He is the best-selling author of 4 books, including a brand new one, The Future Leader, The Employee Experience Advantage, The Future of Work, and The Collaborative Organization. He speaks at over 50 conferences a year around the world. He also provides advisory and thought leadership services to various organizations. He is the founder of the Future of Work University at futureofworkuniversity.com, an online education and training platform that helps individuals and organizations thrive in the changing world of work. Jacob, you were here for episode number 55, and you're back again, and I'm so glad to have you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So 55, and which episode are we on now?
I don't know. You're going to ask me a hard question. Now I'm going to have to go over here and look. I had it sitting there so I wouldn't forget 55. I think you're going to be about episode 223.
Oh, my God. So 150 episodes later. My goodness.
More one a week with a few extras and a couple of months where we did a couple extra bonuses. But yep, there you go. Hard to believe it's been that long. But listen, I got to ask you this question first. So how does a guy who's not that old, I mean, your hair is not the color of mine, how does a guy like you decide to embark on a journey?
It's getting a little crazy. What? It's getting a little crazy over here without being able to get a haircut.
If I had a hat on, mine would look like that too. So mine is longer than it's been since probably college. Longer than it's been since I was your age. How about that? Anyway, tell us a little bit about the journey. How is it that you come to decide to be a futurist?
Well, it was actually something I studied. The whole term futurist is a little tough because you see a lot of people on LinkedIn who just kind of put the word futurist in their LinkedIn titles. It's sort of like putting life coach, right? Everybody's putting life coach or visionary or futurist, these types of adjectives to describe themselves. But few people realize that being a futurist is actually something that you can study. So a couple of years ago, I think it was 2015 or 14, something around there, I actually went back to school to the University of Houston, and I received my professional certification in foresight. So this is a field that you can actually study. I've studied it for many, many years, probably around a decade now, but I never actually had the professional certification to back it up. And so that's why I went back to school and I got it. So now I can officially say that I am a professionally trained futurist and not just something that sits in my LinkedIn job title.
So Jacob is the first person to be here twice and the first futurist we've ever had on the show. So you do look to the future and you talk about employee experience and a lot of other things. And a big part of what you do is focus on leadership. So yes. From your perspective, I'm going to put that and leave that up there. Why have you made leadership a part of your focus and a part of your future focus?
Well, I'd say a few reasons. One, it was a natural transition into the areas that I focused on already, which were employee experience and the future of work. And a lot of that is shaped by leaders of organizations. And the second was that I would get asked a lot when I would speak at conferences and events around the world. The leadership question would always come up. And not so much about present day leadership, but people would always want to know what's coming, what should we be focusing on now to prepare for the future? And I always thought that was a really fascinating question, and there wasn't a lot of data or research behind it. I mean, there's certainly some amazing books out there today that will inspire you and motivate you to think about leadership today. But if you really wanted to understand how is leadership changing and what should you be focusing on now to succeed in the next decade, where would you really go? You might see some surveys that are out there, but there's nothing really tangible that helps answer that question. And so that's what I wanted to do. So for the new book, I interviewed 140 CEOs around the world. And then I also, there you go. It's a good
It's a
looking
lovely
book.
cover
It is, yes.
with a lighthouse and everything.
Oh, that cover, man, that was such a hard thing to come up with. But anyway, 140 CEOs I interviewed from organizations like Unilever, Best Buy, Oracle, MasterCard, SAP, Kaiser, Audi, Verizon, I mean, you name it. And then partnered with LinkedIn, and we surveyed almost 14,000 employees around the world. And so what I put together is what I think is the first book like this, which helps people understand how the world of leadership is changing and what we need to focus on. And it brings in data, it brings in insights directly from CEOs. And it's not my opinion. This is just based on what these world's top business leaders are telling me. So I hope people will find it valuable. And it was a real pain to write.
So the book really, I think, has three, at least for me, has three parts. It has what are the trends that are leading us to what we're going to need in a leader. And then you talk about what's in the subtitle of the book, which is skills and mindsets. And I want to get to those things. And really, I want to say something else before we go on. If you're with us live, you should say hello. You should put a note in saying hello, tell us where you're from. And if you have a question, you can ask it. I'm not going to promise that we'll get to it, but I'll try to get to it if you give us a question. So, but I want to talk a little bit about that trend part. Like, what are the things that, I mean, if the premise is leaders are going to have to be different, the question is why? And so what are the trends? I know you can't take us through the whole book. Everyone's got to buy their own copy, right? Here's the thing. You curated all of the information to create the book. And people ask me all the time, how do I pick the books to have on? And I say, you're not on here unless I love the book. So, I'm curating the books. You're curating the stuff inside. My question is this. Give us a couple of the trends that maybe we wouldn't be thinking about that are going to impact how we need to be adapting and leading in the future.
So the first part of your question was, why is basically leadership changing? And this was a question that I asked all these CEOs. And I said, is leadership in the next decade, is it really going to be that different than it is today? Can't it just be more of the same? And almost all of them said no. And I said, okay, well, why not? And the most common response is because businesses are fundamentally going to change. They're going to look different. We're going to compete differently. Businesses are going to look fundamentally different. And because our businesses are going to look different, they're going to operate differently, it means that we need a new type of leader at the helm of these new types of organizations. So there are a couple of the trends that I looked at in the book. One was artificial intelligence and technology, which aside from the impact that it's going to have just on jobs and careers and how we do things, how we make decisions, it's also going to dramatically impact how we identify who the good leaders are and who the bad leaders are. I think automation will get rid of all the bad leaders who just focus on command and control and decision making, because technology will do that better than they will. And it'll really highlight who are the good leaders are. Who are the people leaders, the ones who motivate and engage and empower and inspire us. So that's going to be a dramatic shift for organizations around the world. Some of the other big changes that we see are around ethics and transparency. So leaders traditionally are not very comfortable kind of exposing themselves. In other words, who are they? What do they stand for? What do they believe in? Leaders traditionally like to play in the gray area, neutral, right? I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to take a stance on that. I'm going to try to make everybody happy. But in this new world that we're living in, employees want to be a part of organizations where they know that their leaders stand for something. So the big fear that leaders always have is, I don't want to let people know what I believe in and what I stand for because they might disagree with me. But the bigger fear that leaders should have is that other people don't know what leaders stand for to begin with. So we shouldn't be worried that people will disagree with us. We should be worried that people don't know what we stand for. So that, I think, is going to be another massive change. Shortage of talent. We're starting to see that now. That's going to be even more prevalent over the coming years. The changing nature of talent. Just what employees care about, what they value, the demographics of people, employees staying later in the workforce, not retiring. I mean, all these things I think are really huge. Purpose and meaning is another one. We no longer just want to work for an organization because of a paycheck. And by the way, purpose and meaning are two different things, which we can get into if you want. But this purpose and meaning aspect is also very crucial and something that we all want. And we're starting to see that, especially now with what's happening with this current pandemic. And then I think another trend that's important is just the pace of change. Just across the board, things are changing quickly. Pandemic is a fantastic example. I mean, how long have we talked about things like flexible work? How long have we talked about things like the need to change how we think about leadership, right? Decades. And we've seen very slow kind of gradual progress. All of a sudden, here comes this virus, forces everybody to work remotely. And we have seen more change in the past 6 months than we've seen in the past decades when it comes to how we think about work. So the pace of change is just enormous, and organizations are having to keep up.
Well, here's the other thing. Back to an earlier point that you made about the pandemic. I used to say that the reason, when people's 401ks became 201ks in 2007, that led people to stay in the workplace longer. We may have that happen again, depending how long this trough is before we come back. And that's going to extend again. Some people are choosing to stay longer for other reasons, Jacob, to your point. But I think that leaders ought to be, and this isn't necessarily a decade-long thing, but it's a several-year thing, perhaps, where you have people that thought, hey, I'm, 6 months, 8 months, another year, I'm going to retire. Not necessarily now. And that may be a godsend for us in some organizations. It may be a real opportunity for us, and especially if we look at it that way. But it's another one of those nuanced changes that's coming in real time, I believe.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
So the other two big parts of the book are, and it's in the subtitle, and that's one of the things that drew me to the book when it first showed up, was the idea of skills and mindsets. We talk in our work a lot about mindset, skill set, habit set. And so I love that you talked about both skills and mindset. And before we dive into them a little bit more, tell us a little bit about why not just skills? A lot of people want to talk about leadership skills, but you're doing two things here. So talk a little bit about the difference and why you think both are important in this context.
So in the book, the way that I differentiate skills and mindsets are basically how you think, and skills are ultimately how the way that you think manifests in the real world. Skills are things that you actually need to know how to do. And your mindset will dictate the actions that you exhibit. So for example, if you have a mindset of putting profits before people, then everything, all your behaviors, your actions, everything that you do is going to be built off of that mindset.
Yep. Run through that.
But
filter.
If you have a mindset, yes, exactly. And if you have a mindset of putting people first before profits, then everything that you do is going to be based off of that. So how you think as a leader is very, very important, and it comes before the skills. So first we need to focus on how we think, and then we can look at how we actually make those things come to life. It's sort of like, the skills might be some of the external parts of a car. The mindset is the engine. Okay, so before you worry about all the other things on the car, you got to make sure that the engine drives, that gets you where it needs to go. And then you can worry about the color, the paint, the wheels, the sound system, all that other sort of stuff. So the mindsets are the core of how you as a leader operate. So
then you put those together and you call, I'm opening up the book now. I'm trying to get there. It's what you call the notable, I can't do that in C2. There you go. The notable 9. You've got 4 mindsets. You paid good money for that graphic, so I thought I'd show it, right? I'm assuming you didn't create it yourself. If you did, I'm even more impressed. But the notable 9,
I cannot make graphics.
You've got 4 mindsets and 5 skill sets, or 5 skills. And we could certainly talk about all of them. We could do a whole episode on each. We're not going to. I really want to focus on those mindsets because I'm with you. They are so critical. We don't get those right, we never get to the skills. You can intellectually teach me the skill, but if I don't have the mindset to match, I ain't going there. It's not going to happen. So I'd really like us, if you don't mind, to focus because people have to buy the book anyway, right? So let's talk about at least a couple of the mindsets. And the first one is, I'm glad you put it first because I love it. You talk about what you call the super perpetual learner, but the mindset is you call the explorer. So talk about that, why that's so important for us as leaders.
Yeah, so I try to come up with these, I guess, catchy sort of personas that exemplify each mindset. So the explorer, the servant, we have a couple of different fun names in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing to remember is that these mindsets, it's not that they're necessarily new and things that people have never heard of. I mean,
Correct.
we've heard of these things before. So there are a couple of things that make this unique and different. The first is that these CEOs that I interviewed specifically identified this collection of 9 things. There are a lot of surveys that you've seen out there where they talk about things like, complex problem solving is important, or, you really need to be good at X, Y, Z. But these CEOs, for example, didn't identify complex problem solving or critical thinking as being as essential as these 9. So the first is that it's specifically this set of 9 that is crucial. In other words, don't worry about what all the other surveys say, just focus on these 9. And the second thing I think that is really important and what these CEOs told me is that a lot of leaders today can get by without practicing these things. And when I surveyed these 14,000 employees with LinkedIn, I actually found that very few leaders around the world are doing a great job of practicing these mindsets and skills. I think it was in the single digits, 10% or lower of mid and senior leaders around the world are practicing these skills and mindsets very well, which means how are a lot of these leaders getting into their positions? And this, by the way, is reflected in the very low employee engagement numbers we have around the world. So it makes you wonder, how are these people getting in leadership positions? Well, think about how you can become a leader today. One, you could be really good at navigating office bureaucracy and politics. You can be friends with somebody else and get promoted. You can close a lot of big deals and bring in a lot of money to the company and get promoted. Maybe you've been at the company for a really long time, and because you've been there for so long, you get promoted. In other words, a lot of leaders get promoted into their positions, not because they're good leaders, but because of these other factors that help them climb that corporate ladder.
Yep.
And what these CEOs told me is that in the future, this is not how it's going to work. Leadership is going to be something that's distinctly earned, and it's not going to be based on all these other external factors that have no reflection on how you can lead others. So it's a very important thing to remember. Okay, so having given that context, the mindset of the explorer is about a couple things. First is curiosity, which is essential. And curiosity is this idea of trying new things. It is being able to deal with stress when new things don't work out. It's being able to explore, to venture into the unknown, getting out of your comfort zone. It is being able to view obstacles as opportunities and things that you should conquer, as opposed to things that are these massive roadblocks that will keep you from progressing. So the mindset of the explorer is essential. It's also being open-minded, which is another crucial factor that leaders oftentimes struggle with. So the mindset of the explorer, I think, is really, really essential. And the lifelong learning piece that you touched on basically means that for a long time, we said knowledge is power. And today, to be the smartest person in the room, all you need is a smartphone, right? Or a computer, access to the internet. And you can look up anything and you can know anything. So today, what is more valuable is how you can learn new things and apply the things that you learn to new environments and scenarios and situations. And to do that, you have to be a lifelong learner. I mean, think about it. How many of us, we're going to have to reinvent ourselves many times during the course of our lives and careers. People are not going to be retiring by the time they're 65. They're going to be retiring, if ever, 70, 75, maybe even 80. So you have this very long time span of how long you're going to be in the workforce, and you're going to have to change many times. I've talked to lawyers who become entrepreneurs. I've talked to chief technology officers who go into marketing. I've talked to CEOs who leave their big, large corporate organizations and lead tiny startups. Everyone's going to have to go through a series of reinventions in their life, and you cannot do that unless you become a lifelong learner.
So you mentioned another one of the mindsets, which is the servant. And I think while you have some unique components there, I think most people, again, would recognize the idea of being other focused and focused on others. So rather than that one, I want to take one that's got a more unique title that wouldn't be obvious until you read the book. And that is the chef. Yes. By the way, we've got a great question from LinkedIn that I will get to in a minute because I think it will tie these together. So the chef, what do you mean by the chef?
Yes. And so really quickly, before I jump to the chef, you're right. The servant mindset is one that a lot of people are familiar with, serving others. But there's one aspect of the servant mindset that people forget, and that's to serve yourself. You have to serve yourself before you can serve others. I mean, if you think about it, when you board a plane, they always say, put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. Because if you're incapacitated, you cannot help other people. And the same thing is true of leadership. If you are showing up to work each day, burned out, stressed out, exhausted, frustrated, angry, depressed, overworked, whatever it is, how are you possibly going to motivate and lead other people? So as a leader, you need to remember, whatever you got to do, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, do it. Exercise, eat healthy. I don't care. Meditate, whatever you need to do, but you need to be your best so that when you show up to work each day, you can successfully lead and guide others. So the mindset of the chef is about two ingredients. And I tell the story of Julia Child in the book. And anybody that's ever tried to
thank the bird. Sorry.
I like
that. Was my only Julia Child right there. So go ahead.
No, that was good. That was good. That was very impressive. Better than anything I can do. So anybody that's ever tried cooking, whenever you try to make a dish, you know that there are a lot of ingredients that go into a dish, and you constantly need to balance these ingredients for it to taste good and to be healthy. For leaders, there are two ingredients that they need to balance, and that is the humanity of the organization and the technology aspect of the organization. And you need both. You need technology to be fast, to have efficiency, productivity, improved decision-making. You need the technology there. But if you only focus on technology, you're not going to be able to attract and retain the best talent. You're going to have issues with quality. You're going to have customers who won't want to interact or transact with you. On the flip side of that, if you only focus on the human aspect of work, you're going to be slow. You're not going to be as efficient. Your competitors will easily overtake you. You won't be as productive. So the key thing for leaders is to balance those two ingredients. Use technology as much as you possibly can, but do it in a way to make your organization more human, not less human. Use technology to augment your employees, not replace them. Use technology to remove a barrier between yourself and your customers, not to add an additional barrier. So technology is a very valuable asset, but it needs to be used in the context of making the organization more human, not less human. And I think today a lot of organizations have it backwards.
Oh, I think you're right. And they're not, and they don't recognize the intention of the question that you're asking. And even if they do, they're misbalancing.
Yeah, I mean, classic example, right? You call a 1-800 number for your Comcast or for whatever cable company that you have, or for checking in for a flight. And the first thing that these annoying freaking things do is first they say a call is being recorded, blah, blah, blah. And then they try to ask you a series of questions. Now, I don't know about you, but the first thing that I do when I get these automated trees is I mash the buttons relentlessly. And then the machine gets confused and it says, okay, let me transfer you to a customer service representative who can help you. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, who has ever found these phone trees helpful? Like nobody ever finds these things helpful. So why don't you just give me the freaking human who can help me to begin with and stop wasting all of our time? It completely is mind boggling to me.
Well, there you go. So the fourth, and I need us to transition it, but just the fourth of the four mindsets, just to complete the thought, is the global citizen. And again, you share some new insights there, but again, I think people kind of get it. The world continues to change. The world is getting smaller, more global, and we as leaders need to and must have that mindset, and not just thinking about across town, but around the world. Yes. But I want to get to a question that was asked. By the way, a number of people are thanking me for having you. So there you go. Here's the question. And we don't have a lot of time for this, but I want us to talk about for a second. What do you think a leader needs to do? What can we do to improve the mindset and culture in our organization? That's a big question. Let's just stay with mindset. What can we do to help alter, adjust, change the mindset on our team or in our organization?
So there are a few things, and it's a very broad question. So it depends on what you mean. Change the mindset from what to what. But there are a few things that I think we can do to make change happen. So first is we need to train leaders to become leaders earlier. Right now, depending on the research that you look at, most people don't actually enter leadership development programs until they're in their late 30s, early 40s. Okay, I think on average, it's like maybe 44, 45, which to me is insane because most people actually become leaders at some point in their 20s, mid 20s, late 20s. You become a leader of other people 10, 15, 20 years before the company actually formally teaches you how to become a leader, which makes no sense because traditionally we always have this concept of, okay, leadership training is an exclusive thing. You got to be, the VIP, you got to be at the company for a while, you got to make an impact, and then we're going to teach you how to be a leader.
Which is call it charm school. They don't call it that out loud. Charm school.
Yes. It's a very outdated way of thinking about it because what it means is that imagine taking an athlete, Roger Federer, Serena Williams, whoever your favorite athlete is. You wait for them to be in their prime, and then you say, now we're going to teach you how to play tennis. It's completely backwards. So the first thing is teach people these leadership skills and mindsets as early as you possibly can. Why wouldn't you want everyone at your company to practice these mindsets and skills, whether they've been there for a week or whether they've been there for 20 years? This is good for everybody. You don't need to be at the company for 20 years before you got to be a leader.
This is the He's back. There, we're both back. Yeah. So why would we wait so long? Is the point that you were making? So
yeah.
I want to shift gears before we finish and ask you a couple of other things. You are clearly passionate about your work, even if the book was a pain to write, as you said, Jacob. I am talking with Jacob Morgan about his brand new book, The Future Leader: 9 Skills and Mindsets to Succeed in the Next Decade. And so you're going to want to get a copy of that. I'll tell you how to do that in a second. But before, you're not just working all the time. You've already told us that we need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of our teams. So what do you do for fun, Jacob?
Probably what occupies most of my time is chess. I know it sounds super nerdy and super dorky, but I take chess lessons with a grandmaster. I'm constantly doing chess puzzles. I am obsessed with chess. So I do that for fun. I also exercise. I like to go to the gym when it's open. So fitness and chess, I'd say, are some of my favorite things. And eating.
Another first on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, a person who tells me that chess is one of the things he does for fun. That's really awesome. That should make everyone here more intrigued by you. I don't think it's nerdy. I think it's interesting. I think it's great. And here's, I know very little about chess, but let me give you a connection between your work and chess. I know that the best chess players are thinking way ahead of the next move. Yes?
Yep.
Far, far ahead. So you're even being a futurist when you're playing chess. How about that?
I do, yes. So there's a lot of analogies between the skill of the futurist and thinking moves ahead and chess. And believe it or not, it's been a very, very effective way. It's been a very creative tool that I use actually in the business world. So chess has helped tremendously.
Awesome. Another question about you is you talked about we need to be explorers. We need to be learners. And one of the ways, not the only by any means, but one of the ways we do this is by reading. So what's something, Jacob, that you're reading now or have read recently?
So there are a few books. There are some chess books that I'm reading, which I won't bore anybody with, but mastering endgame strategy and middle games and puzzles. So that's kind of like the chess book that I'm reading. And then I also love a lot of science fiction books. I recently finished the Annihilation series of books. And right now I am reading The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet.
The Long Way to a what?
To a Small Angry Planet.
Okay. We'll make sure in the show notes that those are there for you all. And I appreciate that. And I'll guess that if people reached out to you on LinkedIn, you'd give them the chess books. Is that fair?
Sure. I doubt anybody is going to reach out to me and ask me about the chess books that I'm reading. But if they want it, I will be glad to give it to you. And
I'm assuming that that's just one of the ways that people can get in touch with you, or one of the ways. So how can people connect with you? Where do you want to point them? I'm guessing this is one of the places, but where can people connect with you, learn more about your work, learn more about the book, etc.?
Sure. So there are a couple of resources. One, if you want to take an assessment to see how well you're practicing these skills and mindsets, you can go to futureleadersurvey.com. Again, that's futureleadersurvey.com. For me, my personal website is thefutureorganization.com, and you can find my email, all my social media stuff there. And if you're interested in the book, you can go to getfutureleaderbook.com, and that'll redirect you to, depending on where you are in the world, if you want Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever you're interested in grabbing it.
That's awesome. Jacob, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to have you. Now I have a question for all of you who are watching and listening, whether it's with us live or whether it's with us later on the podcast. The question is, now what? What are you going to do about this? Just watching us, just listening to us, and perhaps even being entertained a bit isn't enough. The reality comes when you decide to take some action. Maybe it's that you heard that word foresight way back at the beginning and say, I need to think about that. There's some great stuff in this book about the cone of perspective, one of my favorite parts of the book. Maybe what you're going to take some action on is thinking about one of those mindsets and saying, I need to work on being more of an explorer. I need to think more globally. I need to be more of a servant, whatever those things are. Maybe your next step is, I need the book so I can hear about the 5 skills that they teased but didn't talk about. The point is that if you don't take some action from this, it will have much less value than it would otherwise. And we both hope that you do exactly that. And you now know that we're doing something new here. We're trying this live. And if you are with us on Facebook right now, and you can join us there in the future, go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook, and you can actually get these live. And if you join our page on LinkedIn at remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn, you can get them soon after they have been recorded. So you can get them ahead, and you can get a little more information than you might get otherwise. The podcast will still be here. You can reach out to us on either of those places to talk with us, to share with us, to tell us who we ought to have on, engage with us, be a part of the community. Jacob, thanks so much for being here. It was a true pleasure to have you back. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It was my pleasure, and it is my pleasure to be here every week. So I hope all of you will join me again next week for another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.